Welcome everybody to this parallel project training lunch and learn session on sustainable project management. I am absolutely delighted to be joined today by Dan Chaplin, who is a project manager from the National Trust, who is going to talk about some top tips and some real life examples of incorporating sustainability into project management. My name's Ruth Phillips. I'm the head of training delivery at Parallel, and I'm going to be talking with Dan today about securing the future through sustainable project management. We're delighted to have all of you joining us live today. If you've got any questions at all throughout the live session, please do put those into the comments in LinkedIn, and then at the end of the session we will have a Q&A session, and if you're watching this recording as well, we're delighted that you're joining us as well. So let's have a look at the agenda for today. So I'm going to give a brief introduction to sustainability in project management, what that actually means, what are the things that we're considering, and then particularly I'm going to have a look at sustainability as one of the items on the APM competence framework, and talk to you about how sustainability has recently been introduced as a topic on the project management qualification syllabus as well. I'm then going to hand over to Dan. He's going to talk about sustainability in action at the National Trust, the sustainability journey that they've gone through, and give you some examples of real life application and some top tips, which I think will be really useful. And then any questions that people have put into the chat, we will be delighted to answer those. So that's the agenda for today. So let's start off then by having a look at sustainability in project management. This is going to be probably the little bit more of the theoretical side of things, setting the context, and then Dan's going to be able to give you real life experience of doing this in practice. So what do we mean by sustainability? Fundamentally, it's about thinking about our projects and building aspects into our project to make sure that we not only meet the needs of today's stakeholders, but also not overburdening future generations. Now, I really like thinking about that as an aim, and linking it to the National Trust's mission statement, which is for everyone forever, which I think actually encapsulates sustainability. It's for all of us today, meeting today's needs, but it's also thinking about this for the future as well. So there are three particular angles that we consider with sustainability: economic sustainability, environmental sustainability, social sustainability. And I think that that diagram that is shown on the screen there shows how each of those elements overlap. In terms of environmental sustainability, yes, we need to be thinking about use of energy, of carbon usage, aims towards net zero, biodiversity. We need to think about social sustainability, so we need to think about the needs of the community and how the community can also be help with this. That environmental and social sustainability needs to be bearable for both the environment and the people that are living and working in that environment. We also need to think about economic sustainability as well. I think there are plenty of examples of large construction projects that have gone on, and then years later they are sort of empty stadiums, for example, for sports that have not been used because they're not affordable, they're not economically sustainable. So we need to think about the viability of the projects long term, and also then in terms of that overlap between social and economic sustainability, we need to think about how equitable the usage of the places and the outputs of our project actually are. So those are the angles that we're thinking about when we talk about sustainability, and really we need to incorporate all of those different angles into our project to achieve our sustainability goals. So let's have a think now about how the APM assists us with this. So sustainability is actually an item on the APM competence framework. talks about this as the ability to balance, as I've just talked about, the environmental, the social, the economic, and also from a project management perspective, the administrative considerations that will impact on a change initiative. It's about individual and organisational responsibility, and I think that's important as well. It's just not about organisations or large projects to think about sustainability, but we all have a responsibility to make sure that what we're producing, what we're doing, the way that we're doing that is sustainable in the long term, over the life cycle, not just of the project, but the outputs that we're creating as well, as we said, for everyone today, but also forever as well. We need to think about the working practices and methods. It's not just about the things that we produce, as well, the ways that we are applying certain methods as well, to make sure that that this becomes more habitual. And really being able to think about balancing those things in terms of the triple bottom line. People talk about people, planet, and prosperity. And again, there's those three aspects there in terms of the social, the environmental, and the economic sustainability. We really need to think about this early on in project planning and execution. So as the new APM project management qualification PMQ syllabus was brought live in September this year, sustainability is actually a new topic on that syllabus, which I think is welcomed by everybody, as it's now linked to the competence framework and the appearance of sustainability on that competence framework. It is a topic on the PMQ syllabus as well. So there may be many of you that are in the audience that have either taken your PMQ and would like to learn more about sustainability, or those of you that are preparing to take your PMQ, you may want to hear from Dan about his real life examples of incorporating sustainability into projects and the lessons that he's learned from that. Okay, so I'm going to hand over to Dan now, and he's going to talk to you about sustainability in action at the National Trust. So first of all, welcome, Dan.
Thank you very much. If you want to switch on to the next slide, I'll just give you a very quick introduction to the National Trust, and then an introduction to myself and my role at the Trust. So for those of you who don't know the National Trust, we're a national organisation in the UK looking after a lot of built heritage, a lot of countryside, a lot of special places. So we've got a lot of stuff, and critically, if you look over on the right hand side, that stuff needs a lot of looking after, and that means we have quite a large portfolio of projects, so about £500 million of active project portfolio at this stage. And that equates to about £250 million of project spend per year. So depending on where you're coming from, we see that as quite a large sort of project portfolio. And obviously, also over on the right there is our kind of net zero ambition. We've got a 2030 net zero target, and I'm well aware that net zero is not the only element to sustainability, but it is one of the things that is a key driver for us within the National Trust in terms of how we're trying to bring sustainability into our projects. So if you could switch on, Ruth. So yes, as Ruth said, I'm a project manager. I work within the North region of the National Trust, so across the north half of the country, just delivering what tends to be built infrastructure projects, although I do get a nice selection of curveballs thrown in there. So there's an 8-meter high red spiky bridge in the bottom right hand corner of the slide there, which we put in, plonked in the middle of a World Heritage Site a couple of years ago. So a bit of a mix, but my background, my portfolio at the moment does tend to be around mostly new build construction type projects. So that's the day job with the National Trust. And then I suppose my background before coming to the Trust is in a more kind of technical role around sustainability. So still in project management, but looking much more at the technical side of kind of sustainable construction, deep retrofit, all that sort of kind of thing, passive house sort of background. And so I guess when I came to the Trust, having that background, I I wanted to kind of bring that experience and use it within the trust to try and look at how we do our projects, and that's so the remit is kind of broadened out from that sort of technical background into looking at our project management as a whole, looking at how projects operate and how we can bring in sustainability into our kind of processes and systems and drivers across our project portfolio as a whole. So I'll be telling you a little bit about the projects that I've been involved in, but then also about the story across the trust and how we're trying to make our projects more sustainable. And I'm gonna kind of frame that around just telling you a little about our journey, where we've kind of come from, where we've got to at the moment, and some of the stuff that's working well, some of the stuff that isn't working so well, because I'm certainly not here to kind of say the National Trust has got this all sorted. You know, we know exactly what we're doing. We're kind of like many organisations. I think we're very much on a journey. There's some stuff that's going quite well, but there's an awful lot of challenges that we're still grappling with and trying to work out how we solve. So yeah, I'm not here to say we've got it all sorted. I've put this image up. This is the Footprint building. It's in Cumbria, in the Lake District. We built this around 2006, and the reason I put it up is because it's kind of indicative of where we've come from as a trust. You know, we are a conservation organisation. That kind of means that we have lots of passionate people inside, and generally people have a bent, you know, towards wanting to consider things in a sustainable way. And that has kind of meant that over the years we have done lots of projects which could be considered quite sustainable in some ways, and this is one example of that. You know, it's a straw bale building. It was very low embodied carbon. Lots of kind of really good sustainable considerations went into it. But it's up here because where we've come from is a picture where it was very kind of sporadic as to how we were kind of performing on projects. We had good projects which were generally led by the passion of the people who were involved in them, but for the most part it wasn't sustainability wasn't a major kind of consideration in our projects. And our initial kind of grappling with trying to solve that and trying to bring in some kind of structure around how we consider sustainability within our projects was we went through a period of time of kind of trying to, what we now realize was kind of over prescribe what sustainability looks like. We kind of say all projects must do this or must do that. And, you know, examples I remember from the built environment side where we were kind of saying, well, we're not going to put in any more oil boilers. We're not going to put in any more gas boilers. Everything's going to be sort of biomass or air source heat pumps or whatever it was. And we had sort of crazy things like all projects must have a draft lobby with 2 doors on it. But it was, what we quickly found out is that approach to sustainability so very quickly fell over, because projects in general, projects by their very nature are kind of very unique set of contexts, unique set of requirements. And so it was quickly obvious that it's very, very difficult to kind of to have a blanket approach to sustainability across your projects. And that may be, you know, different for some of you who are in organizations which deliver kind of lots of very similar projects, but certainly we found that that approach didn't work. So I think if you skip on, Ruth, my first kind of tip is just about not being too prescriptive or formulaic about, you know, what project sustainability means. And if you jump on again. So I'm not expecting you to be able to kind of read this slide. I'll sort of explain what this is, but where we've kind of got to now, or the journey, the part of the journey that we're on at the moment, is trying to kind of move on from that being overly prescriptive about what projects have to do, to providing slightly more generalistic guidance. What we're trying to do is guide our projects as to the processes that they need to be going through and the things that they need to be considering, but not necessarily, you know, the outputs of what those considerations or design processes need to be. So that's kind of one of the core parts of that is this, what we call our sustainable design tool. And it's essentially, it's an Excel spreadsheet, because what major problems can't be solved by just producing an Excel spreadsheet. But it's and this is kind of some screenshots of it, but it's made up of a number of principles, and then it has kind of, some summary information that can be pulled out of. But if you flick on, Ruth, you'll see I've just pulled out as an example one of the principles that's in there. So hopefully you can read the language with it and see the type of things that we're kind of asking our projects to do. And if you jump on again, so there's 31 of these principles, all containing guidance to lots of different aspects of sustainability. So we have a huge breadth of kind of projects that we deliver, from IT projects through to kind of land and nature projects, built environment projects, people-based projects. So we've tried to develop a tool which kind of covers things, covers a breadth of guidance which goes across our whole project portfolio. Where possible, we've kind of pulled on industry best practice. So, in my world, in the construction world, BREEAM has been something that sort of informed this tool, but there are other pieces of industry guidance and best practice that we've pulled into the tool in a bid to try and make sure that we're not, when we're talking to externals, when we're bringing in consultants, we're not throwing things at them which is some completely, internally mad hat approach to sustainability. They know what they're doing. We're using industry language. We're not asking them to do things that they haven't seen before. And in terms of the use of the tool, we've kind of rolled that out. It's the use of the tool is mandatory, or it's mandatory for projects above a certain threshold. But the adherence with all the principles isn't necessarily mandatory, and that's because we're aware that there are these other contexts. There'll be principles that aren't relevant to some projects, but there'll also be ones that are. But the project has other constraints which mean it can't deliver. So we do allow our projects to reject those or to not adhere with them, but it has to be kind of accompanied with a rationale or an explanation behind why we're not taking that best practice approach in this on this occasion. And then all those principles are then kind of owned. We have what we call a principal owner, so they're owned by a specialist within the business. So it might be the water policies are owned by the head of water, and so on and so forth. So it has somebody there with real knowledge who's then responsible for keeping that principle up to date in line with industry best practice, but also being a point of contact if people have queries. And then there's a whole suite of kind of guidance and sort of explainers and things like that go along with the principles. So those owners are responsible for delivering that. So that's the tool, and that's where we're up to with it. If you flick on to the next slide, I was just going to talk very briefly about an example of that tool then being used in action and what difference that's made. So this is one of my projects. This is it's the Studley Reveal project, which is a fairly major development at Fountains Abbey and Studley Royal World Heritage Site. So we're looking at one of the entrances there and the buildings around it and the landscaping around it and the way it all operates. So it's kind of a what we call a multi-component project. It's got lots of different elements of food and beverage and welcome and interpretation and all that sort of thing. But it's been going on for a long time. There's lots of legislative complications around it. So we've been at it for 7 years and we're still trying to get a planning application. So the sustainable design tool has been brought in during the life cycle of the project. So it's kind of come in as we've been partway through, which has presented its challenges. But what it has done, I would say, I've got a background in sustainability. I'm passionate about it. And I've led this project since the start. So we were already kind of trying to do the right thing in general. But what the sustainable design tool has done for us as a project has kind of, firstly, it's sort of legitimized or kind of provided a structure around what we're trying to do, and it's given us a kind of organizational backing for the approach that we should be taking, if that makes sense. So whereas before we were kind of sitting down as a project team and looking and going, well, we think this is the approach we should be taking around sustainability, and then trying to sell that kind of outwardly from the project. The fact that we've now got the sustainable design tool has given us a kind of legitimacy to say, no, look, this is what the organization wants us to do, and this is how we're going to deliver that. So that's been really useful. And then in terms of the sort of more practical implications on the ground, that's meant that we've brought in a sustainability consultant to look at things like producing a life cycle carbon assessment, producing a resources plan, producing waste management plans, and all those sorts of things, and generally having oversight over the project design and the project design team. The principles within the sustainable design tool have been kind of divvied up across different elements of the design team and the project team. So, you know, where there's principles relating to water use or water management, they might go to the M&E designer. Some of the landscape principles have gone to the landscape architect. So it's been divvied up like that. And there's been lots of kind of practical changes that have come out of it, but two key ones are, where we actually got to was that we changed our structural engineer because we didn't feel like they were the right practice to be delivering what we wanted to from a sustainability point of view. Got a new structural engineer on board, and we've changed the structural design, the roof structure, to get rid of a lot of the steel work that was in it, to move it to timber. And likewise with the foundation, we've gone from a concrete trench to sorry, my screen just dipped off, but I've managed to get it back. We've gone from a concrete trench to a piled foundation design, so we've reduced the amount of concrete in the construction by about 50%. So that's just a kind of really quick example of it in action. But if you flick on to the next slide, like I say, you know, we're definitely not there in terms of how things are working. We're seeing some benefits from it, and I've mentioned some up there around what's working well with the tool. But there's still a lot of challenges, both on this project, but also, you know, across the organisation around how this tool is working and how sustainability is working in general. And I think the first problem I've put there is the way the tool's been kind of rolled out. We do have lips. I mean, Ruth was mentioning earlier on that there's an individual responsibility, there's an organisation responsibility, there's a project responsibility, and I think we've got to get that balance right within the National Trust. We're still struggling with that a little bit. There's certainly lip service buy-in to this tool and the implications that it will have on projects, but actually it still feels like our project teams, our project managers are the ones who are kind of driving it forward, are having to kind of sell it upwards. So, you know, they're having to say, look, I've been asked to deliver this. It's going to mean you, project board, or you, Mr. Sponsor, are going to have to fork out a little bit of extra money, a little bit of time. Whereas it should really be coming the other way. It should be that our kind of governance coming down to us and saying, look, how are you delivering on this? How can we do better? That, you know, that's where we need to get to as an organisation. And the next challenge I've listed there is kind of related, because the idea behind the tool is obviously it drives change within the project, but also it provides, the tool itself doesn't actually deliver anything. It just captures what's going on and gives you guidance. And hopefully out of that, you can then pull some summary information. And the idea being that then that feeds into our kind of gate approval process, and that, you know, projects get challenged and the governance kind of challenges how they're performing. What we're finding at the moment is that there's not enough kind of knowledge and understanding at that kind of gate board level to really review what's coming in front of them and to really hold projects to account in the way that we need them to do. So we are putting some stuff in place to try and address that, you know, with kind of training, but also with peer reviewing and kind of interpretive guidance that's going into those gate boards alongside our projects. And then generally, we're struggling with, you know, I kind of cynically joked about trying to solve these massive problems with an Excel spreadsheet. We do need the technical knowledge alongside as to how, you know, what sustainability looks like on the ground. And we have got people within the organization with that knowledge, but we're certainly feeling thinly spread on the ground. And there's a few of us kind of trying to go out and support lots of projects, but we do need to kind of upskill our people and perhaps bring in more technical knowledge to support this rollout. And then the last one on there, which if you go on to the next slide, I'll talk about in a bit more detail. But what we're finding in a lot of cases, certainly not in all cases, but in some cases, is the approach. Projects have lots of different constraints and desires and ambitions, and actually, in many cases, this is being kind of seen as something that sort of sits over here until I need it to kind of come in. So we're carrying on with our projects the way we've always done, and then at whatever point, usually with these projects, it happens just before they've got to go to a gate board, and they go, oh, sustainable design tool, we need to kind of what's that, what does that look like, and they kind of bring it in and they kind of go through, and that can cause a challenge because you've made lots of decisions which should have been considered in a different way earlier on, and it means that this is we then generally do get changes that are arising out of that, but they're kind of these sort of bolt on the side of the project. Oh, we'll add this, or we'll do that, or and then quite often what happens then is, because these are kind of new things and they're additions, they also can be snapped off and taken away quite often, and they're kind of seen as added cost or added complexity or added scope. And so they kind of get value engineered or kind of engineered out at a later date. So we get that kind of circular thing of sustainability coming in and then to some extent getting kicked out again. So if you go on to the next slide, and I think this is probably the kind of the summary of kind of where we are now and where we're trying to get to, is we need to move from that kind of point where it's being seen as something that's another thing that gets added onto a project scope, to something that is kind of very much in the core of the project from the offset. And that's happening well in some cases, but in a lot of cases it isn't. And I think, to me, what that looks like is just being really clear up front what your sustainability goals and targets are, and making sure they're kind of built into the project ambition and the project scope from the off. And if you do it like that, you can then get the buy-in of your governance structure or your sponsor or whoever that is, to kind of agree together that that is what the project is trying to achieve. And if what we're finding is, when we go down that route, it very much brings a more the integration of sustainability means it's not seen as something that's added cost, added complexity, added scope. It's something that's there from the off, and it doesn't tend to get sort of engineered out in the same way. You're able to kind of keep in alignment with those goals and targets and deliver that all the way through. And I think the third arrow on there just points to the fact that if you're really clear from the outside what it is you are trying to achieve, you are then in a position to pull together the right team, procure the right designers, brief them properly around what it is you're trying to achieve. Which, what we were finding is, often people are pulling teams together on the basis of the overall project ambitions, and then suddenly finding that they haven't got the right skill set to deliver some of the sustainability ambitions that we have. So that's where we're trying to get to. I wouldn't say we're there. We're kind of making good strides in terms of making that happen on some of our projects, but and it's showing positive hope, but there's a long way to go with it. So I think if you click on Ruth, I mean, that's my second main tip would just be, get those goals in right from the start and get the buy-in from your key stakeholders, your governance, into integrating those with the project. And if you so just, I mean, part of what I've just said is the future. We've got a long way to go on that in terms of making that work really well. But I think where we're starting to think, or certainly my understanding of where the next level of where we've got to get to, is just that choosing the right projects thing. And I think this links back to Ruth's the kind of 3-circle Venn diagram that we were talking about at the start. what I'm sure many of you will be familiar with a similar thing. What we find is by the time projects are in the form of a tangible kind of project, there's been quite a lot of thinking in the minds of whoever it is upstream who's kind of making, come up with the project idea, identified the opportunity, is having a challenge with the business need. Whoever that is, have often made quite a lot of there's quite a lot of decision making that's kind of happened in how we're going to solve this problem or how we're going to deliver on this opportunity. And so by the time it kind of is formed into a project, you can do the best job in the world on kind of delivering what's been set in front of you. But if it's not the right project, then it's inherently unsustainable, if that makes sense. So we're trying to make sure that kind of sustainable thinking is in the kind of options appraisal and the decision making that's right upstream, right from the first time a whisper of an idea in somebody's head appears. Are they thinking about what's the most sustainable approach to delivering a solution here? And that's a really hard thing to do, because it happens in so many different places, in so many different kind of people's minds, in kind of, really sketchy conversations between one-to-ones and things like that. So we've got a long way to go to kind of get the thinking in everybody's mind at that stage. But I think that's our kind of next big challenge, really. So I think if you flick on, Ruth, yeah. So the top tip there is just do the right projects, not the wrong projects in the right way. And I think, that selection of projects is really key. And the reason I've put this slide back up of the project that I started with is that I think, that was a brilliant project in many respects. It was a really sustainable building. It was really low carbon, but actually, in the early years of its life, it was a really underused building. It was a kind of community use building. It was a training space, but it was really kind of underused. And I think it was a bit of a white elephant for a few years, and it was somebody's passion project. And actually, did we really need to do that project? Now, I'm happy to say that it is being much better used now, and it has found itself a kind of good life. But I thought it was just a kind of neat example of how you could do something in the most sustainable way possible, but if you're doing the wrong thing, it's not delivering what you're setting out to deliver. Thank you very much.
Okay, fantastic. Thanks so much for that, Dan. That was so interesting. I really liked hearing about your thoughts there. Really interesting. And when I'm talking about sustainability as part and parcel of the PMQ training, one of the key messages is about really building this in so that, as you said, it's more difficult to engineer it out later. And so hearing from you about how the lessons that you've learned from that is really interesting as well. I was quite interested of your thoughts about choosing the right projects to do, and maybe this is something that we need to think about as a portfolio management topic as well in terms of sustainability, so that when we're creating those portfolios of projects and selecting projects to do, that sustainability is being thought about at that point in time as well. So thank you for that. Really interesting. So yeah, just a little bit of a summary before we open up for questions. We've already got a few questions coming in. Yeah, as Dan said, I think this is it's really important that this is an individual, a project, and an organisational responsibility. His top tips there: don't be too prescriptive. I think that's really nice. And the use of the design tool, I thought that was great. Being able to see that and being able to see the flexibility, and I like the principal owners as well. Develop clear goals, and then, as we've said, do the right project. So I've put the link to the National Trust website up there, where you can learn a lot more about climate and environment policy, and see some other examples of how that sustainability is at work throughout the National Trust. Just a few things about what Parallel delivers as well. For those of you that are or about to start or thinking about doing your project management qualification training, we've got a podcast on sustainability that you might want to listen to as well. And so there's some additional information there on our website if you would like to follow up with that. Okay, so what I'd like to do now is to ask you a few questions, Dan. We've had a couple of questions that have come in. First of all, about kind of lessons learnt from projects that you've worked on that can be applied to other projects. So we've got one saying, what about civil projects like roads, rail, etc., that need to deliver a net carbon zero future? What lessons do you think that you've learnt on your projects could be applied to those sort of projects as they strive for sustainable delivery? So what are your thoughts on that, Dan?
So there's a couple of things that come to mind. I think it is really, I mentioned earlier about making sure that there's some clear goals, some clear ambitions, some clear targets, and then making sure you're procuring the right team, the right designers to deliver that. And that is something we struggle with. I think the problem is sustainability is such a buzzword at the moment that if you go to any kind of consultants or designers website, they'll have a page on sustainability. They'll have a blurb. They'll be able to kind of sing their credentials around sustainability, but actually really separating the kind of wheat from the chaff and understanding who it is who can really deliver what it is you need to deliver from a design point of view is really important. And I think that's an area where I mentioned we've kind of struggled with a lack of technical knowledge. You almost need a certain level of kind of understanding or support to make those procurements in the right way, to brief people, to brief your designers, to set your targets. So it may be that there's a kind of level of bringing in some expertise that is there to kind of advise you on that, but and sits kind of slightly separately to the rest of a design team or project team in more of a kind of advisor role. I think the other thing that comes to mind there, and I think where we are, is probably behind where a lot of organizations are in terms of understanding. We really struggle with understanding or benchmarking where our projects are. We don't have the data on what the kind of carbon impact is of what we've delivered in the past. So I think that's one of the principles within the design tool, is about doing life cycle carbon assessments on as many of our projects as we can. And that's partly about, assessing the impact of that project individually, but it's also about building up data and enough kind of understanding around our projects to be able to kind of set our own benchmarks. And I think that's a challenge for us on many of our projects, because they're slightly they don't tend to fit particularly well in kind of industry benchmarks or industry standards. Some of them do. We're just starting to look at a new consultancy hub, which is one of our office buildings, and things like that. There's some really clear guidance and standards externally. So I think it's trying to understand where we are so that we can then set ourselves incremental targets to improve and have some real KPI based targets. Otherwise, we end up in this world of just a kind of, do whatever you can, do as well as you can, and you don't really have this ability to kind of map your way and see where you're going and have a kind of clear roadmap to how you're going to get to net zero or where it is you want to be.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, there are certainly quite significant challenges there. I think for me, thinking back to some projects I've historically worked on with organisations that maybe don't have such a conservation or sustainability focus that the National Trust may do. I think that sometimes it's very positive if those organisations and those projects those large civil projects like the ones we were talking about there, feel that onus on them to really include the sustainable goals in there, to see that the impact that they can be making. But I think that there are some challenges, not least in terms of the skill, the technical knowledge, and it's kind of hearts and minds as well, isn't it, to include this. Okay, another question then, actually linked to that in terms of technical knowledge. Now, you mentioned that you've got quite a strong technical background in sustainability. So the question is then, do you need that technical background to be able to, sort of lead sustainability within a project area? And if you don't have that technical background, where would you advise somebody to start?
I think, I mean, I think the project management role does not necessarily have to be a specialist in any particular area, do they? But I think there is an advantage in having at least a kind of a reasonable level of understanding around what sustainability looks like. And maybe that doesn't come from the individual, maybe it comes from, I think where we are as an organization is that we're at a position where we're able to kind of give guidance, but there's not enough people's understanding or experience of kind of delivering that within projects to really kind of have a grapple on what that needs to look like. But I think for me that there's definitely something around, you can bring in the specialism, you can bring, you can buy in specialism, you can get consultancy to deliver that knowledge, but it's about keeping that level of kind of independence from the rest of the design team. I think where we've often gone wrong is you kind of get a designer on board and then you put the onus on them to create sustainable goals or create say what they can do about sustainability, and sometimes that works really well, but actually often it means that the design team are kind of marking their own homework in terms of sustainability. So even somewhere in there, I do think you need an element of kind of independent knowledge and understanding, which is helping you to kind of set goals and decide whether the performance is being delivered through your project team. It's almost an assurance role as much as anything, I think.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And I was thinking about your comments there about the kind of the knowledge and awareness, when you come to decision gates and things like that, and needing to maybe have that greater awareness and provide specific assurance in those areas, so that it's not just the project team and the project manager that are championing this, but as you said, that this is being driven by our project sponsors, our steering groups, the organizational goals itself, that they cascade down then through the projects and the way that we deliver projects, rather than projects sort of trying to manage sustainability upwards, as it were.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay. Those are all of the questions that have come in. So I've just popped a banner up on the screen. So if anybody would like to get in contact with us for any further questions, then you're able to do so. Just before we finish off, though, I would also like to show you that we've got another lunch and learn session happening in a couple of weeks' time on Friday, November the 22nd at 12:30. Myself and Paul Neighbour are going to be talking about agile project management, the good, the bad, and the ugly. I wonder who's going to be which on that. So we'd certainly love you to join us for that session as well, if you are able to. Just remains for me to say thank you so much, Dan, for joining us today on the Lunch and Learn session. It's been really interesting hearing about the projects you've been working on, some of the challenges you're facing, but to hear about your passion and drive to really build sustainability into projects from the start, and the benefits that this will give all of us, for now and in the future, has been fantastic. So thank you very, very much to that. I hope you've enjoyed talking about sustainability at the National Trust as well.
Thank you.
All right, fantastic. Thank you very much, and goodbye to everybody watching. I hope you'll be able to join us again in the future.